Hello and welcome to a new game from TCEC's Premier Division. We have Leela versus Scorpio in a Queen's Indian defense. Here are the standings, the current standings after 33 rounds. And Erstein is leading by 2 points. Leela and Stockfish fighting for the second place in the final. There's a very big fight between these guys, and the Premier Division never been this strong before. Alright, so we have Leela versus Scorpio, and the game started with d4, knight f6, c4, e6, and we have a anti-Nimzo with knight f3, and the book led them now into b6, the Queen's Indian. Black wants to play bishop b7 and have a huge influence on this diagonal, especially the e4 square. We have now g3. White wants to also be in this diagonal and counter Black's light square bishop. Bishop b7, bishop g2, and now we have the Capablanca variation with bishop b4 check. They are exchanging the dark squared bishops, and now after castles, we have d6, and this is the end of the book. d6 is a very logical move in the absence of the dark squared bishop. Black wants to put his pieces on dark square and compensate for the missing bishop. And White's plan here is to get in e4 and later on even e5 and push this knight away from his beloved f6 square, and then White can maybe get an attack on a7 or something. Of course, Black will try to do everything to stop White from getting in e4, and he already has these two pieces nicely guarding e4. Now, back in 98, Kasparov played here knight c3. And after knight d7, he played queen c2, and we can now see that he can get in e4 unless Black wants to play d5, something that his opponent Akopian didn't want to do. So here now after queen e7 and e4, e5 is a constant threat, so Akopian played here e5 to block this pawn on a light square, but this now gave White a hole on d5 to work with, and eventually this knight jumped in. They exchanged knights, and after c takes on d5, the c file opened up with pressure on c7, and Kasparov managed to win in the end. But Black can be a bit more ambitious and try to prevent e4 from White by playing knight e4, attacking both knight and queen and threatening a knight exchange. And if now White takes here, then after bishop takes, Black still maintains control over e4. And if White tries something like queen f4 with the idea to drive the bishop away and then get in e4, Black can even play f5 and still control the e4 square. And if this knight moves, Black can exchange the bishops, and getting in e4 now is not that easy since the f file opens up for Black. So knight c3 is not such a big problem here for Black. In another game, much later, Aronian tried queen c2, but now bishop e4 harassing the queen works, but Black even has c5 here, immediately attacking White's center, and after rook d1, Black can play c takes on d4, and after knight takes, Black can also exchange the light squared bishops, and Black's position is okay. The game is relatively even. In another game, Portish also tried here after queen c2 and c5, knight c3, but after cd and knight takes, they also exchange light square bishops, and Black's position is fine. So Leela didn't go for e4 immediately, neither with knight c3 or queen e2. She played here rook d1, and this move wasn't played much, at least not on the highest levels, but it's a very strong move. It stops c5, attacking White's center, because now White can take, and this pawn is pinned to the queen, and after something like b takes, White wins the pawn, and probably also the game. So c5, not really possible here. So Scorpio played here knight d7. This is much better than knight c6, because this knight now blocks the bishop's view of e4, and White can try again to get in e4. He's now already threatening e4, and if knight e7, then after queen c2, e4 again is possible. So knight d7 is a more logical choice, but now the problem is that this knight interrupts the queen's defense of the d6 pawn, And this now allows white again to play queen c2 and get in e4. For example, if c5 now, then white can just continue with knight c3, and if cd, then now white can take with the rook, and we can see that d6 is undefended, and white can also double the rooks and put a lot of pressure on the d file. So c5 is not really an option here. So Scorpio tried the other idea of harassing the queen with the bishop. Now we have queen a4, and after a little dance with the queen and the bishop, the queen finally goes to e3, and now we have rook b8, and after knight c3 attacking the bishop and bishop back, you can see that e4 can't really happen, the queen is in the way. So Leela played here queen f4, trying to get in e4, but now the knight starts harassing the queen, which has to go back. And now after the knight goes back to guard e4, Leela plays queen f4 again, maybe hoping for Scorpio not repeating. But of course Scorpio knows it's tough and chases the queen back again. And now we have knight f6 back, and here Leela played a3. Seeing that getting in e4 it's not that easy, Leela plans to play here d5 and cut this bishop's view of e4 and then get in e4. But d5 weakens the c5 square, so Leela is planning to play b4 and guard c5 with the b pawn. So now the game continued with a6, and now we have again queen f4. Maybe Scorpio forgot this maneuver with the knight, but no. Scorpio went there again, chasing the queen back again, and now we have finally d5. And this is a very good move because, as I mentioned, it blocks this bishop, so e4 now is possible. But this pawn is also attacking these squares in black's camp. And also, very important, d4 is now available for a white piece, especially this knight would love to go to d4 and increase the pressure on c6, e6, b5 and f5. But Scorpio shot that idea down with e5, guarding the d4 square, and now we have finally e4, and Scorpio played here a5. He's fighting for the c5 square, he's trying to win over c5 for this knight, but now Leela played b4, making that impossible. The game continued with rook a8, and now we have rook c1. This is another logical move. Leela has space advantage on the queen side and in the center, and c5 looks like the most logical break in the long run, where Leela could try to open up the c file and put pressure on c6 and c7. Now, since Leela has space advantage in the center and the queen side, Scorpio's best chances are on the king side, especially that these pawns are pointing in this direction. And here now he played g6, and he wants to expand by playing king g7, rook h8, and then h5, h4, and try to open the h file and maybe get something. Leela continued with rook b1, and now we have bishop a6 attacking c4, the queen defends, king g7, knight d2, bishop c8, queen e3, and now we have a little high-level maneuvering here. But eventually Scorpio gets in h5, and you don't really want to allow h4 here, so Leela played h4 herself, and now we have rook g8, maybe trying to get in g5 at some point and open the g file. And now we have knight b5. This knight found a very, very nice square for himself here on b5. He's attacking c7 and also puts pressure on d6. And this knight can't really be driven away from here, because then this pawn just takes and d6 will become even weaker and the knight can stay on b5. So Scorpio's best chance here is to play bishop a6 and take out this knight. But here Leela played bishop h3, preparing for the complex ending that would arise after bishop takes on b5 here. She would want to play here pawn takes and open the c file, attack c7, and after the rook defends, take also on a5 and force black to take the pawn. And now black has an isolated pawn on a5. c7 is also a backward weak pawn. And here now Leela would like to get in a4, but the problem is that a4 immediately runs into knight c5, shielding the weaknesses on c6 and c7 and also attacking a4 and e4, and black would be okay. So instead of a4, she was planning here to take out this knight first, and now if this other knight tries to come here, then after a4 and knight c5, she could temporarily defend a4 with the rook, and then after black moves something, play knight b3, and this knight now has to decide what to do, and neither taking on b3 and neither knight d7 is good enough for black, because c7 is now a long-term weakness, and so is a5. The knight is attacking it. White can put more pressure on it with the queen. White has a very nice positional advantage here. a5, c6 and c7 are all weak. So Scorpio wasn't very hurried to take this knight on b5, and he tried some other moves, but Leela just improved her position and shuffled along, and eventually after White played here king g2, Scorpio didn't want to wait for Leela to improve her position even more and took out this knight on b5, but now the c file opened up and White has a long-term advantage, a long-term target in the c7 pawn, and not wanting to wait Leela to take on a5 and give Scorpio an isolated pawn on a5, he took on b4 himself. But now after a takes on b4, c5 is guarded and there's no knight c5. In this position, Scorpio played knight back to e8 to defend c7, but this position is just too passive for black, and from here on Leela gradually won more and more squares in black's position. She's intending to play rook b2 and challenge the a file, and slowly she's pushing back the black pieces and chases them to the king side. We now have rook b2, and after knight f6, rook a2, and Scorpio doesn't really have a choice here. He has to take the rook, because if he plays something else like king g8, then rook a6 could come, and Leela could then double, and this rook would still have to leave the a file. Taking the rook now is just too late, because now there's b takes on a6, and Leela has a passed pawn, which is even more dangerous than a rook on that open a file. So Scorpio doesn't have a choice, has to take here, and now the rook lands on the a file and prepares to enter to a7 and put pressure on c7. We have knight a7, rook a7, but now the queen chases the rook back. Queen d8, but the pesky rook goes back again, so queen b8 again, rook a2, queen d8, and here Leela now played knight c4. She would love to play something like queen c4 and put pressure on c7 and then go back with the rook and so on. But queen c4 immediately would allow f5 here from Scorpio. And this is not something you want to allow if it's not needed. Of course, Leela wouldn't mind f5 here if this knight could go to f3 and from there to g5 and then land on e6 and give a nice family fork here. But this is not possible since the knight on h7 is guarding the g5 square. So it's much better to prevent f5 at this point, and that's why Leela played here knight c4, intending to play queen c2 when the queen is preparing to pressurize c7 and c6, but it's also guarding against f5. We now have knight f6 and queen c2, knight g8, knight d2, and now knight f6. f5 now would be terrible for black, because now Leela could actually do this maneuver with knight g5 and knight e6, since the g5 square is not guarded now. After something like pawn takes knight g5, black is in big trouble. So f5 not an option. We had knight f6 and now queen c6. Leela invades with the queen, and after taking over the a file, she is now preparing to take over black's back rank here. And she's pushing and pushing the black forces to the king side and takes away more and more squares from them. And somehow this reminds me of cowboys herding cows. Weird, I know. So the game now continued with rook g8 and now rook a8, forcing the queen to e7. And in this position, which looks fantastic for white, they both evaluated this position only at +1. But where is black's counterplay here? Black doesn't have an active plan in this position. Leela continued with rook a7, and she's already threatening to take here since this pawn is pinned to the queen. Of course, Leela's long-term plan in this position is to win over c7 and then also b6 and allow one of these birdies to the queen. So rook a7 is already threatening to take here, so the queen had to get out from the pin. We now have queen b7, king h8, king f1, knight g4, and now knight f3 eyeing the g5 square, so Scorpio prevented that. King g1, rook f8, rook a8 now, and after queen d7 we have queen c6. Leela is going for a queen exchange, because if the black queen takes, then the b5 square becomes available for this knight. And this knight on b5 would of course attack c7, and this would be a very good position for white. So it's understandable that Scorpio avoided the queen exchange and played queen e7. And now we have rook c8, a very nice move, attacking c7 twice and basically cementing these two pieces in their places, because none of those can move. If the knight moves, then rook c7 happens. And if the rook moves, let's say to f7, then black loses the knight because it's attacked twice. So these two pieces have to stay here for now. We have king g8 and now queen a8, forcing the matters. Now this knight can move, but after queen b8, Scorpio is now forced to exchange the rooks, otherwise queen c7 will happen. We have rook takes, queen c8, and now white took over these squares from black, and the queen is in an absolutely fantastic square here on c8, and it's also stopping f5, and black doesn't really have moves here. Scorpio continued with king h7, and now we have knight d2. Leela is planning to win even more space by playing knight c4 to take away the e3 square and then push this knight back with f3. Scorpio continued with knight e8, guarding c7, knight c4, and if now Scorpio plays something passive like king g7, then white has a winning advantage, because now after f3 and pushing the knight back, the bishop gets loose and can go to d7 to attack this knight, forcing the king to defend it. And now Leela has a winning blow. Pause the video if you'd like to think about white's killing blow here. The move that Leela could play here is knight a5, completely winning. If the pawn takes, then of course after a takes, this pawn will become a queen very, very soon, and black can do nothing about it. And if Scorpio doesn't take the knight, play something like g5, then this knight comes to c6 with big threats. The queen is attacked, the queen has to defend the knight, and after something like queen f7, now the knight can attack the queen again. The queen goes back, and now after this check and king f7, Leela can just take the knight, and after queen takes, take on c7 with check, and then take on b6, and white wins again. So Scorpio can just wait and see if Leela can finish him off. So he tried something active here with f5, but this now just loses a pawn after e takes on f5. If pawn takes, then queen takes with check, and then Leela can also take here and win another pawn, and that would be hopeless for black. So here after e takes on f6, Scorpio played knight f6, but now came f takes on g6 check, and then f3, and after knight h6, they both evaluated this position at +2. Now Leela continued with knight e3, and she's eyeing the f5 square. She wants to jump in, probably with the knight, and now after e4, the simple f4 is enough for white to win. One of those pieces can still go to f5, but seeing that she can force a winning endgame, Leela played here queen e6. And now if Scorpio doesn't exchange the queens, then pawn takes on e4, and the white is of course winning. So Scorpio exchanged the queens, and now after d takes on e6, he took on f3, king f2, knight g4 check, king takes on f3, knight takes, king takes, and this is a winning position for black. Scorpio gave this check on d5, but after king e4, taking here on b4 would be losing immediately. since the knight ventures too far from white's pawns, and he can't really return. c6 and d5 are taken away, and white simply wins here by advancing the g-pawn, intending to take here with check. And if the pawn takes, then h5 check, and of course the king can't take because then this goes in. So after king f6 now, just simply h6, and the king is not in positions to stop both pawns. For example, if g takes on h3 here, then h7, and white queens first, and if king g7, then white can push the other pawn, and after h2, queen the h pawn, and then queen the e pawn, and then just simply play queen h5, pick up the h2 pawn and win. So Scorpio is not in position to take here on b4. He needs the knight to guard these pawns, and he played here knight f6 check, and now we have king d4. Knight g4 of course is again hopeless. Exchanging the remaining piece would be just suicide. After bishop takes, pawn takes, and h5, one of these pawns goes in. The king is not in position to stop them. Scorpio needs to stick to his knight, and he played here knight g8. Now we have bishop g2, and this bishop is coming to f3 and attack h5. Knight e7, bishop f3, knight f5 check, and now king e4. And again, if the knight takes on g3, then he will be forced away from the white pawns. After king f4, the knight can't return because then he gets pinned and won. So the knight would be forced again to f1, and then white wins again with bishop takes on h5. Again, the king can't take it because this pawn goes in. And after something like king f6, just bishop g4 and push the h pawn, and white wins. So here after king e4, Scorpio played king f6 instead. And here now, of course, Leela would like to take the h pawn, but this runs into this fork, and black actually wins. So instead of taking on h5, Leela played this very nice finesse move first, e7, decoying the knight away, and now bishop takes on h5, and white is completely winning. These pawns cannot be stopped. They both evaluated now this position at around +4, completely winning for white. The game continued with knight f5, king f4, knight d4, bishop e8, knight e2 check, king f3, knight d4 check, a couple of checks, but eventually the checks run out. And now we have bishop c6 and bishop e4, stopping the pawn. Knight g7, bishop d3, knight h5 check, king g4, knight g7, king f3, king e5. And now after bishop g6, king f6, and bishop c2, we have finally these pawns moving forward. And both the knight and the king will be forced to go back and guard against those pawns becoming queens. And here now we have king e5, chasing the knight away, taking on d4. And then the king is going towards the queen side and takes these two pawns also. And the knight is hopeless against the king. And here now after king c6 actually, Leela now gave up these two pawns to go into a 6-man table-based position that is completely winning for white. And here now, after she gave up those pawns and took on b6, the game was finally adjudicated as a win for Leela. A very, very nice game in the style, in the grinding style of Leela. In the end, I would like to thank to Guilherme Lima de Carvalho for his recurring $3 contribution to my channel. And of course, I would also like to thank to Adolf for his contribution, and everyone else who is supporting my channel one way or the other. Please subscribe, like and share, and check out some of the other games. Thanks for watching, and see you soon. Bye bye.